railways were privatised in the 1990s, there was a view really put forward by the disciples of market forces that franchises were probably really only a relatively temporary measure. They would be replaced in due course by private operators bidding for slots to operate on the network, run their own trains. And the result would be, like had been planned for bus deregulation in the 1980s, significant reduction in cost, significant reduction in fares, and an improvement in the quality and quantity of services. All sounded marvellous, except that's not how it worked out. But having said that, a few entrepreneurs did succeed in running their services on the network, and they were called open access operators. But it's an issue that has been divisive for a number of years in terms of trying to work out whether or not these open access operators are really running without any subsidy, or whether there's some indirect support that is being provided. Pre-COVID, it was less an issue because it was the government tendered franchises who took the revenue risk, and not the government itself. Though, of course, when the franchise came up for renewal in 7 or 10 years' time, they'd end up paying for it then. But that was 7 or 10 years' time away, and that allowed them to kick the can down the road, something governments, of course, are extremely good at. But post-COVID, it's a very different matter. Now, the government is taking the revenue risk and the cost risk directly under management contracts. So the presence of these open access operators on quite a congested network does raise the question of whether indirect subsidies are being given, and what that means from a policy point of view. Now, one of the most successful and entrepreneurial open access operators is First Group, who run the Hull Trains and Lumo Trains operations on the East Coast Main Line between London, King's Cross, Edinburgh, and of course to Hull. I had the opportunity to speak with Martijn Gilbert, Managing Director of Lumo Trains and Hull Trains, and we tackled all the big issues of open access head on. It's a lively interview. We cover a lot of ground, and it was great fun. And I felt quite insightful. I hope you do too. Here's what Martijn had to say. Well, Martijn Gilbert, Managing Director of, I think is it Hull Trains and Lumo, or how do you describe your particular role? Because you're responsible for the open access operations for First Group, aren't you?
I am. So technically, I'm Managing Director of First Open Access Operations, but in reality, I'm kind of split in two. I'm the Managing Director of Hull Trains when I'm in Hull, and I'm the Managing Director of Lumo when I'm with our Lumo business. And that's actually really important in terms of reflecting that they are two very different businesses in very different markets as well.
Got it. Okay, so multitasking, very impressive. Just talk very, very briefly about your career, though, because I was intrigued when I had looked on your LinkedIn profile. There's a huge amount of bus in your sort of in the first part of your career. How did you get into that, and what made you sort of switch over to rail in due course?
Yeah, so I actually started my career at 23 years ago now for London Underground as a trainee schedule compiler. So having that sort of all-important appreciation for the timetable, I think the timetable is the basis that everything is built upon in the world of transport, be it bus or rail. But then I moved into bus soon after that and found myself working for a company that was bought by Arriva in about 2008. It ended up going on as secondment to Arriva's UK rail division, which was based in the offices of Arriva Trains Wales in Cardiff, to advise them on rail replacement buses and also train crew taxis, using some of the experiences that I had at that time in bus, and ended up actually moving full-time into the rail division. I did 5 years for Arriva UK Trains, got involved with when we were bought by Deutsche Bahn, with the integration of DB's UK passenger businesses into Arriva, a little bit of rail franchise bidding as well, and then I moved back into bus in 2013 when I took up my first MD's role for one of Arriva's then recently acquired bus operations.
Right.
I then moved to Reading as chief exec of the council-owned bus operation there. Very different experience to working for a PLC, and before that, sort of smaller SME type businesses, and then came back into the PLC world 6 years ago, moving to the Northeast for Go Ahead Group to be MD of their regional bus operations in both here in the Northeast and also, ironically, in Hull. So running Go Ahead, Go Northeast and East Yorkshire buses. So ironically, similar geography to when
Yeah.
this role came about. And I thought, wow, this is open access. I've always been very excited about what open access does and what it can do, way back from when we bought Grand Central at Arriva. And so, yeah, there's not many jobs leading open access rail operations. So it was too good
Thought
an
you'd grab
opportunity.
it.
Absolutely. And for the first time in my career, I didn't have to move home, which was a double benefit as well.
Double benefit. Well, that's fantastic. Well, what a varied career, but obviously all entirely relevant. And I've always felt the very best people in the world started as graduate trainees at London Underground. So nice
Did
to
you
be
did,
part.
yeah.
Nice to be part of that club. So I can't. I have to say the backdrop's amazing. So you're clearly sat in a train simulator for
Yeah,
Lumo.
yeah.
So you definitely win the prize for most creative and coolest backdrop. How's it going at Lumo and Hull Trains sort of post COVID? We obviously had that dramatic impact as a result of the pandemic, and ridership sort of dropped significantly. How's the bounce back going?
So really well. Hull Trains is second only to the Elizabeth line in terms of growth now. It's fully recovered to pre-pandemic passenger numbers, and actually has gone. Our last set of ORR statistics, so publicly available information, shows 30% growth. Lumo, of course, only started following the pandemic, so it's new to the market. But last year we reported carrying 1.3 million customer journeys, and I think the really important thing for me when we talk about open access and where open access fits in the world of rail now is that with Hull Trains being 30% up, Lumo putting 1.3 additional journeys onto the East Coast Main Line, we know that our fellow open access operator, Grand Central, run by Arriva, 17% up on pre-pandemic numbers. So huge growth, and the main at one time franchise, now contracted, now DOHL operator, LNER, is also reporting a full recovery and growth. That's the only part of the UK that we're seeing that. So I believe that sort of entrepreneurial, challenging competition with a small c, competition for getting more customers into the wider rail market on the East Coast Main Line is a real showcase example because of the mix of operators that we have on long distance rail here. So yeah, it's going really well from a passenger numbers, we like to call them customers, point of view, but also some really good initiatives going on within the organisations, and most importantly, work for our customers. So yes, I'm sitting here in our training simulator centre here in Lumo. I won't take any credit for the backdrop. That's thanks to Richard Selkoud, who leads on our comms, who was shoved me in here to come and talk to you. But yeah, it is a different setting to come to talk to you in. We've just launched our Learning and Development Centre in Hull, in the K2 building in Hull, with a very similar facility to what you see behind me here today. And that Learning and Development Centre will support the work that we do on training our own drivers, which we've been doing for a number of years now, but haven't had the simulator. And then we've got a good story on operational performance, lowest level of TOC on self-cancellations. We were really proud to pick up the Golden Whistle awards, for a joint award for Lumo and Hull Trains. And also our fleet has got gold and silver spanners. And then if that's not enough, we've just had our first wave of our customer satisfaction survey, all mapped across to the wider industry with the former NPRS question set. And that's shown that we've got a 96% customer satisfaction score, which I'm really pleased that both companies got the same score, because it means I don't have to choose or be seen to have favourites. It's a healthy internal tension as well.
Well, you're also doing a fabulous. Not only do you win most creative backdrop, you're definitely winning the award for getting all those key messages in. So absolutely brilliant.
Yes.
But look, good to hear that things have recovered and going on from that. Let's talk about open access, perhaps more as a general set of principles, okay? Rather than, which is always what I try to do, rather than sort of any picking on one particular operator. And there's probably a few key points that I think it's worth bringing out. And we've got sort of 5 principles. They're not in any particular order, these, although the first one is probably perhaps the most emotive, or certainly the biggest. And that's the question of abstraction. So there's a view that when an open access operator comes onto the network, there is abstraction. And that can take a number of forms. It can either be through the ORCAT system in terms of inter-available tickets, because obviously you have to sign up to the ticketing selling agreement and accept inter-available tickets. So that gives you a chunk of money. But then also there's just the reality that people migrate over from the existing operator onto you. And this can be a very big number, as we've seen from the ORR's analysis. Surely that's a subsidy by any other name.
Well, I think the world's moved on, I would say, in terms of how people buy and retail tickets. The OR report that you talk about is pre-pandemic and quite a few years before that. I think it was 2016 that they had that research commissioned, and certainly even the OR, in more recent activities, certainly can see that abstraction is not the big thing that it used to be in terms of the sort of whole all cats position. We're long distance operators. The bulk of our customers buy a specific ticket for a specific train. The revenue is lying where it falls, and certainly if you look at what's happened with recent changes to LNER's ticketing as well, that's only amplified that further. And in terms of where we are today with a more leisure focused market, it is all about advanced purchase fares. The all caps revenue is a
I accept that, Martin, on all cats, and certainly on longer distance operators, it will be much more around advanced purchase, so the intra-available elements smaller. Totally accept that. I'm also really talking about other forms of abstraction. I mean, let's take an example that's not yours, right? So let's look at the recent Grand Union application to go to Stirling, which was approved. The ORR's own analysis, so this isn't 2016, this is now, said the gross abstraction on that would be £24.4 million per annum. Now, some of that's going to be all cats, but most of that's simply going to be taking business off Avanti West Coast. So I kind of go back to my previous question, really. That in any other, you can't really describe that as anything other than subsidy, because whereas the revenue risk was taken by the franchisee pre-COVID, it's now taken by the Secretary of State.
Well, I can't talk about other operators' open access applications. What I can say is, in terms of the two that I look after here, in terms of our current operations, we are very, very clear that we believe that where we sit today, I quoted at the start the numbers about customer number recovery and now growth, that actually we are generating sufficient trips. Yes, there is movement between operators. People go online because that we have impartial retailing regulations in the country, which we really support. That people may have intended to travel with Company A, see a fare for Company B, and switch. But actually, there's a whole greater piece around there that what we're doing in terms of open access, bringing in some healthy challenge and competition to the market, helping to keep fares keen for customers. I mean, Lumo is offering really, really, really great value for money that's making it competitive against low-cost airlines and even intercity coach travel, and making people rethink about driving, and also just opening up new journey opportunities. I hear from people that say, we wanted to go and see this show or this football match, but actually, the cost of the journey was we felt would be too expensive to justify it. They've actually come on and seen a headline £26 fare and gone, actually we can justify doing this. So, and it can be no coincidence when we talk about those numbers. COVID's given us a sort of reset in terms of customer numbers. That East Coast Main Line is bucking the trend. The whole long distance market, if you look at last year's OR stats, is 13% down. Yet East Coast Main Line, everything is up in terms of that. Those London focused journeys.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you can tell me whether this is right or not. Your argument is, even if there is an element of Lumo, let's take Lumo as an example, of taking customers that were on LNER and are now going on Lumo, notwithstanding that, the whole market for everybody is now bigger. So the net effect is LNER's got better and you've got better because more people are traveling. And that is as a result of having open access competition on the line.
Pretty much it. Yeah, absolutely. Because we think that we're helping fuel an overall growth of the market that is more than compensating for any movement between operators with choice. It's helping keep fares keener for customers. It's attracting more customers to rail. And that's why I talk about us as open access playing a part of the wider rail mix in terms of making rail more attractive to more people. And that's being replicated in places beyond the UK. There's some great case studies in Italy and Spain as well, where the incumbent state-owned operators are actually saying, "Okay, now, we're welcoming this challenge to us. It's sharpening up what we do, and it's growing customer numbers for all operators."
Okay, let's move on to another point, right? So this point is around access charges and what we now have as the infrastructure cost charge, because the argument was always levelled at open access. Oh yes, terrific, but that's just top line. They're not actually paying their way. They're only paying variable track access. Now, clearly, the ICC, the infrastructure cost charge, is designed to address that. But again, you don't pay it for the first 2 years. I know Lumo is now paying it, right? But you don't pay it for the first 2 years. Then it's 25%, then it's 50%. So it's year 5 before you're making a meaningful contribution to variable track access. So again, why is that not a subsidy? Certainly, if not in year 5, certainly in the first 4 years.
Well, look, open access model's been going now for nearly 25 years. And with that, I think we can see there's a whole wider range of benefits that it brings. It's and yeah, I think it's also fair to say that the costs of the railway infrastructure do not go up pro rata per train or per train passenger. So it is right and proper that we frame that accordingly. The bulk of the operators that are paying both variable and fixed price, fixed track access charges are, of course, now in receipt themselves of huge amounts of government subsidy. Many of them were always net subsidy TOCs rather than premium paying TOCs anyway. I get that long distance historically used to be a premium paying situation. So yeah, we need to think about the wider area of where the money's coming from. Where we sit today, we are the only operator on the East Coast Main Line that is not in receipt of any public subsidies at all directly. I get your point about track access charges. However, there is, as you now say, the infrastructure capacity charge. That's phased in over that 5-year period. And that reflects that there's obviously huge startup costs that go into setting up a brand new train operation. Trains aren't cheap, but also that your business case will see a gradual growth of customer numbers from you don't just fill your trains up from day one that you hit the tracks. But actually, when that's fully phased in on Lumo, we will be paying more per passenger journey than any other operator on the East Coast Main Line in terms of track access charges. So I think there's a balance of the old traditional open access model, which was about a form, I would like to call it, of levelling up, if you like, better connecting underserved or not served at all areas. So this has been of huge benefit to places like Hull that only have one direct train a day to London. It now has 8. Grand Central's done the same on the routes down from Sunderland and from Bradford. Lumo's better connecting Morpeth and Stevenage, but actually reflecting that Lumo has, for the first time, I think, really taken open access into areas where people may have said, well, it already has a sufficient train service, such as Edinburgh or Newcastle. Well, actually, guess what? Once that's gone in there, it's grown customer numbers exponentially. It's added real value. And yeah, there's the infrastructure, the ICC charge that comes in, reflecting that is a market that can bear that in terms of the economics of it all. Track access charges is just one dynamic of the economics.
I accept that, Martin. It is one part of it, but when you take each individual part and you can kind of break it down, it does add up then to a bigger picture. I mean, it is a challenge talking about track access and premium and subsidy TOCs, because obviously Network Rail's revenue support grant has rather change the picture of who pays premium and who doesn't pay premium. So there's a little bit apples and pears comparisons if we're not careful. But nonetheless, whilst taking your point about setup costs, that ICC, you still get a leg up. I don't necessarily mean you per se, but you still get a leg up in the first few years. And not only that, if I understand it, it only applies if one of the stations served en route is, I think, is at least 15 million passengers going through that station each year. So there are some open access operators who may not even pay it at all. Now, I know you are, but that's, again, you can see why there's that sort of sense. It's not an entirely level playing field. But let's just talk about enhancement, because you've mentioned there about sort of paying for enhancements for the network. ICC deals with, if you like, maintenance renewals, but the network needs enhancement, right? North of Newcastle, you've got restriction on the power supply, but you're not going to pay anything towards that. So who pays for that then?
Well, we're paying no more or no less than any other rail operator in terms of into that sort of thing. You don't you do see incremental improvement schemes funded by TOCs, and proportionally we have our own versions of that. So we've just renewed the platform surface and station fencing at Howden. That's a £1.2 million investment on the part of Hull Trains. It's a good example of an open access operator investing in infrastructure. Grand Central did a very transformational project in Wakefield. we will be announcing our committed schemes at Lumo very soon as well. So I think it's unfair to say that open access isn't paying into the sort of infrastructure renewals piece. I would like to think that those numbers are certainly proportional to any sort of commitment that you'll see from other passenger TOCs or freight operators into improving the wider area. But also,
hang on a minute, because that's ever so slightly, that could be taken the wrong way. I wouldn't dispute at a TOC account level, but LNER is owned by the Department of Transport. So the Department of Transport is picking up the bill for premiums as well. It might be through a different route as opposed to going through a TOC. But take the specific example. You would love, I know, because we've talked about this before, you'd love to have a strengthened power supply north of Newcastle to be able to run more trains, right?
Well, 10-car trains, actually, longer trains.
Longer trains. Well, we'll come back to capacity management. We'll come to capacity management in a minute. Longer trains, absolutely brilliant. Would you be prepared then to pay a fair contribution towards the infrastructure cost of upgrading that power supply?
Well, we'd potentially be paying more in-track access charges if it was a charging regime that was based on vehicle lengths, as some of them traditionally have been. I think that's a discussion we'd need to be having. There is an acceptance in the UK, and Hugh Merriman, the outgoing rail minister, obviously mentioned it in his interview with you that there's a 5-year control period settlement for Network Rail. I think the number was something like £41 billion that he quoted, which is actually the sort of UK government commitment to the infrastructure. As I said earlier, the costs of running the infrastructure don't go up incrementally in both fixed and variable track access charges based on the number of trains that you run. There's an element of genuine fixed costs there. Open access operators are not shy from contributing to infrastructure schemes. We're certainly not saying that we aren't investing in the infrastructure. We absolutely do, and I firmly believe that if you look at both the earlier open access operators in terms of the wider economic benefits that they brought to the areas that they serve, better connectivity, new jobs. That's a massive thing. We've got 125 people in Hull that have direct employment from us, and we're investing in their skills and development, and want to expand and grow that.
And that is terrific. Sorry, let's just there's a couple of other quick ones if we may. So capacity, you mentioned that briefly. A 5-car unit taking up what is a valuable commodity, which is a slot on the East Coast Main Line. That can't be the most efficient use of capacity, surely. What can be done about that?
Well, I think firstly, it's really important that we're making sure that capacity is also fair for the communities that are served. So actually, it may well be the case that some of the routes that are served off of the East Coast Main Line by some of the open access operators, such as let's take Grand Central, for example, to Sunderland or to Bradford, really important that those communities are linked, as it is for us at Hull Trains, that Hull is linked. If those markets can only support demand for a 5-car train, none of them are on clock-face hourly timetables. So I think there is a balance to be said to make sure that capacity is proportional to those communities, those regions that are served. But actually, here with the two organisations I represent, we're certainly not saying that we just want to sit at 5-car pass. We've just mentioned Lumo. We would have, I'm sure by now, placed an order for new trains to grow what we do here if we weren't capacity constrained in terms of the electrical supply system between Morpeth and Edinburgh. And look, that's still being looked at, and an increasing number of Hull Trains journeys are already 10 cars. So actually, that's one carriage more than many other operators on the route. So I would say that open access is actually on a pathway to bringing even better utilisation.
So final point. At the moment, performance on the network's not good enough, right? There's pockets of fabulous work going on. Never dispute that. But overall, it's not good enough. And there is a view, it's certainly one that I promoted, that there needs to be a bit more slightly old-fashioned, if I can call it that, approach, directing mind, people call it, to sorting out some core performance issues. How does open access operate in that world? Because there is a danger, is there not, that everybody turns up waving their track access agreement and say, well, you don't telling me what I can and can't do. Here's my contract. How do we manage our way through that new reality of needing to get a grip on performance network-wide?
Well, look, very early background in my career is in timetabling, and so I have an absolute appreciation for the importance of the timetable. And I'd like to think that how we operate here. I just mentioned that we picked up some really good accolades in terms of lowest TOC on self delays. And we've got a great performing fleet thanks to our work with Hitachi. So we are very focused on making sure we play our part in delivering a reliable railway. We aren't an organisation that sits around and waves that contract, but equally it's really important that we do protect the services that we've worked hard to build up, particularly places like Hull, where we are the only operator for many journeys for customers. I think there needs to be a holistic view, but it does need to be collaborative with people working together. I get slightly nervous when we talk about sort of controlling minds. I hope that they can be more guiding than controlling. We do have a vibrant mix of different types of operators. Freight is a really important part of that mix, and a complicated thing that needs to be weaved into timetabling and operating planning. For me, it's really important that we don't lose sight of the customer in all of this. That's why we're ultimately here, is for our customers. And a big, we as an open access operator, no subsidy, fully commercially exposed. We live or die by giving a good experience to our customers. And it's really, really important to me that in a wider industry timetabling process, we make sure that we are absolutely prioritising all of our customers across all the regions. So, look,
absolutely no disagreement with that. It has to be customer focused, and we're in strong agreement on that. Look, we're almost out of time. Two very quick questions, if I may. Number one, Labour Party have just published their new rail policy. There's some words around open access, but quite careful words that talk about where there is spare capacity, where it adds value. Did you, when you read that, do you go, great, as you were, or do you think there's more discussion that needs to take place there? What was your sort of reaction to the overall policy, I suppose?
I think there's always more discussion that needs to take place, and of course it's also with the department and with the regulator and with Network Rail as well, because they're an important part of the machine. But the two principles around where there's capacity and where there's a market where we can show that we're going to do something that's going to bring more people to the rail market, that not primarily abstracted test, which we think we've got really good sound evidence on proving that we're not abstracting, that we're growing the market, have always been the two sort of guiding principles for open access. So we're really pleased to see that Labour has recognised the benefits that open access can bring. We are based in Labour heartlands. We have helped deliver huge benefits to the economies of Labour heartlands already, and they know that. And we have businesses that are very well liked by our customers, our communities, and our colleagues as well. A really important role that our colleagues play in delivering our services. I haven't mentioned enough about them in our interview today, but they do absolutely fantastic work and make the real difference that makes us who we are. But look, we actually had Louise Haigh come to Hull very recently, and she came to see what we're doing there. We hosted Hugh Merriman here in Lumo not so long ago. He mentioned it again in his interview. But what I would say there is that open access can be a healthy challenger to bring in the very best of the private sector in terms of their entrepreneurial spirit, cost control. We can demonstrate what good cost control looks like. We can demonstrate what good revenue growth looks like. And we can bring, I think, a little bit of energy, enthusiasm and dynamism that's a good sort of counterbalance and calibrator, I think, to make sure that we don't suddenly become a one-dimensioned rail industry. So nobody is sitting here and saying that open access is the silver bullet to all of the rail industry's problems, but I think it's a good, healthy thing to have a small bit of competition in the market and helping to improve the wider market. And I'm really keen that we continue to step up and play our part.
Plans for the future? I know you've got a Rochdale plan, so anything else on the cards that you're prepared to let us know?
So the exciting plans. So we've already announced our aspirations to extend our existing Lumo service to Glasgow. So lots of work underway on that. The application has now gone in. There has also been plans announced for a sixth Lumo path, albeit only Newcastle to London to begin with. We hope that once the East Coast timetable is sorted, that there certainly was capacity in there for that, and we hope that that can be preserved. You've heard me talk about 10-car operation. Lumo has been very successful. It's offering, I like to think of it as a sort of third tier in the market. LNER do a great job in terms of the first class market, meeting the demand there. They're also there for the consumer that wants the flexibility of a sort of walk-up timetable, that wants to bring lots of luggage with them. But if you want the cheapest possible journey, and you're prepared to commit to a specific train like you do on a low-cost airline, then that's what Lumo exists for. And that sort of new tier in the rail market, I think, is really exciting. And that's why we also want to be bringing that to Rochdale and down the West Coast main line, serving communities such as Eccles and Newton, the Willows and Warrington Bank Quay that we've mentioned. And then, of course, at Hull Trains, we've already got a number of customers from Sheffield who connect into us at Doncaster. Sheffield has one of the highest, or rather the lowest, modal shares of rail. 75% of the journeys between Sheffield and London are still by road. So we think that that's right for bringing in something a bit different that can help shift some of those journeys from road to rail and open up new journeys, and also some great opportunities with places such as Worksop, which is really, really, really super enthusiastic about hopefully having its first direct service to London since the 1960s. Lots going on in that part of South Yorkshire and across to Retford as well. There's a new atomic energy plant going in. There's a new business park going in. So we think there's a good, strong case in terms of the market today, but even more coming in the future. So yes, we're definitely looking to do more, and behind the scenes, keep investing, keep working with our colleagues, keep improving our product. We've got some great local community partnerships. We've even got our own train beers brewed on our routes, both in Hull and Lumo. We proudly take brand.
Diversification of revenue. That's terrific. I honestly didn't think we'd get Worksop onto Green Signal. So that again that's fantastic. Look, I'm very conscious of time, and you've been so generous with yours. I have to be honest and say that the question of abstraction still remains an issue for me, particularly when it comes to matters of significant scale, right? And I do take your point about if you can grow the market greater than the transfer to other operators, that's got some logic behind it. But it's when it gets to scale, I think there is still a challenge. But listen, I tell you what, you are an absolutely brilliant ambassador, not just for open access, but particularly for Lumo and for Hull Trains. And that has been fabulous discussion. Really appreciate your time, and congratulations on everything that you're doing, because as I've said many times, at a company level, I think there's some terrific stuff going on, and I really appreciate you spending some time telling us about it. So Martijn Gilbert, thank you very much indeed.
No, thank you, Richard. And I'd refer you back to the customer growth numbers for the East Coast Main Line that's leading the way because of the benefits of open access that is growing the whole market, not abstractive.
There we go.
Thank you.
There we go. We may have to agree to disagree a little bit, but I've still enjoyed the discussion tremendously. Martijn, thank you so much.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I do hope you enjoyed watching and listening to that interview as much as I did doing it. Martijn is passionate, he's committed, utterly focused on customer service, and for my money, very impressive indeed. Did he convince me about all aspects of open access? I'd have to say no, but I think it's quite a nuanced debate. I mean, Martijn said himself that he believes there's space for a small number of open access services, sort of effectively, keeping everybody honest and ensuring that we don't become a one-dimensional railway. I think I can see that where it's a relatively small number. I think the question becomes a lot more challenging when we're looking at, for example, the West Coast, where there is potential there for a significant number of open access services. And there, I think the questions of revenue abstraction and enhancement costs, in effect being indirect subsidies, become big matters of policy. But you'll have your own view, and please do let us know in the comments what you think. Do you agree with Martijn? Do you think I made some fair points? Do you think it's more complex than that? Love to hear what you think. Please do like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow the channel and give you more of videos like this, interviews with people who can show and throw real light on some of the more complex issues of the railway. So thanks so much for watching, and see you soon.